Hey, how many one? Can everyone hear me? Okay, so I'm going live for the first time in a long time. I wanted to make this live video specifically about indigenous music versus the classical music education that is pretty much provided to all elementary school students. And pretty much what you find in every school system here in the United States and Canada. There was recently a post that was going around basically saying that classical music, has high standards and excellence and makes everybody practice so much, whereas indigenous music doesn't. Indigenous, every time they play music, it's a practice and everybody sits around and just kind of comes up with things. It's very innovative, or what do you call it, improvisational, and that is just completely not even the point at all. So I think it's very important, if you are a music educator and you shared that post, it's extremely important if you are a music educator and you shared that post to know that that post has no real backing. It has no teeth, no reality. It does not mirror reality of what is going on. So I'm a classical musician. I'm also a classically trained music educator. I have a master's degree in music education. I went through the whole system, but not only that, I got a full ride music scholarship to the university for my undergrad. How many people, how many of you music educators can say that was your situation? I've been a first chair player many times. I've auditioned and landed the first chair role when I was much younger. I don't do any of that right now. But man, I practiced so much in my younger years on classical music. So I know what it takes to be an excellent musician. I know the hours and hours it takes to be able to put in time for your instrument, to be able to read difficult music, to get full ride scholarships, to be the first player, to be the drum major, to be all these things that we would aspire our music students, to reach high levels of excellence within classical music. But the other part of that, I'm also indigenous. So I'm Native American. I'm a member of the Pyramid Lake Paiute Tribe. There's my tribal flag. I just got done teaching a Zumba online class, and I usually put that up all the time. So I'm a member of the Pyramid Lake Paiute Tribe. I grew up on a reservation. I still live on the reservation, and I attend a lot of powwows. And even if I don't attend powwows, I attend a lot of Indigenous, North American Indigenous, I should say. I attend a lot of conferences, youth conferences for Native people. I just got done with a wellness retreat of a Native American organization. So I'm around Indigenous people, different tribal people all the time. And one thing that is very clear to me, again, going back to this post that was shared saying that indigenous music is the exact opposite of classical music, kind of stating like there's no excellence, there's no real hierarchy, there's no real excellence in indigenous music, that nothing could be further from the truth and the lived reality. I think it's really important that music educators today, if you were classically trained, then you need to really get out there and experience lived realities with the cultures that you want to know more about. It's not as simple as just reading a piece of paper. It's not as simply as I read a book about your culture. The amount of times I have had music educators tell me I've read this book, or they've sent me, even like people in their master's degrees and maybe even their doctorates have sent me papers talking about Native American music. I can read what you've written down, but if it doesn't match the lived experience, then whatever it is that you're trying to write down academically, I'm not going to support any of that. Because if it does not match the lived reality, it means that what you've written down is not true. So to anybody, it was a Meisner post about indigenous music versus classical music. Any of you music educators who are still thinking that there's value in these posts, you need to take a look at actual lived reality with cultures, not, oh my gosh, they put it in such a pretty form. They put it in a colonized PowerPoint form, you know. It came in an academic package that I'm used to seeing versus at the actual lived reality when you're out there with other cultures experiencing their music, experiencing their dances. We aren't out there with PowerPoints, you know, delivering all the information in little academic bites so that all the people there can understand what's going on. That's not lived reality with Indigenous people. I'm part of Indigenous people of the North America, and I've also met other Indigenous people from New Zealand, from Ireland, and from other various cultures around the world. So when I'm speaking as an academically educated person, music educator, I'm also speaking from being around other Indigenous people and the experiences that we have. Now, do we have excellence within Indigenous music? Oh, yes, we do. I just got done going to a powwow this past weekend in Reading. It was a competition powwow. Not only was there competition with the dancing, but there was competition with the singing. So if we have no excellence and everything, as this post claimed to be, every Indigenous moment is a practice, then why would we have winners? Why would we have a first, a second, a third, and a fourth place? How would we even be able to do that if we, as a North American Indigenous people, had no level of excellence or had no, high level of performing? It just doesn't happen. So these are the things, if you know me, if you're a music educator and you've known me, or if you grew up with me and you were in those groups where I was first chair all the time, making the all-state groups. I was even command performance one time. And what that means is when I was 15 years old, I was voted as one of the best performed clarinet solos in the state of Nevada when I was 15. What does it take to reach that level of excellence? Well, it takes a lot of practice, but I also do believe it does take training, but it takes practicing the right way. Versus now going back to this powwow that I was just a part of. In my adult age, I don't go for auditions anymore and playing my instrument and things like that. Now I'm mostly going to my powwows and entering a lot of contests. So in my dance contest, I actually came out as first. Now, if there's no excellence within Indigenous cultures, how did that happen? It happened because there is excellence in the culture. And also being a dancer, when the drummers are playing their songs, it's up to me, being a dancer, my responsibility. None of our music is written down, right? We don't sit together and the drum doesn't, I didn't have a drum group to where I said, hey, can you play this song for us for contest? I didn't have any drums I don't have any family drums. And sometimes that can happen. But when I go out there for contest and the drums start playing, I have no idea what kind of a song they're going to play. I might know it, I might not. But I know the forms and I know the drum beats. That is my responsibility to be doing as a dancer, to be knowing these things. That involves a level of studying the songs. How do I study the music if it's not written down? Well, and this is a big one for music educators versus if you're thinking that Indigenous music or Native American music or other cultures, if you think that we are under classical music, you're horribly mistaken. The libraries that exist, the oral, memories of many Indigenous people from around the world is highly extensive. If you ever go to a cultural exchange or when we are doing, say, our powwows, you will see no music. You will see nothing written down. Do we need it written down in order for it to survive? No, we do not. Now, this is a really out there, this is probably a really out there concept for those of you who are classically musically trained and you think music is something that we train people to read music, and the highest form of music is music reading. No, it is not. No, it is not. I go into, in the lived reality, the lived world out there. I've been in many different situations because I have put myself in those situations, because I have decided to be a culturally competent educator, because I have decided that when I meet somebody, I am going to let them tell me who they are, and I am going to be interested in their culture. For people who lack culture and say they don't have one, I am not necessarily interested in getting to know anything about that individual so much so, because I know it's going to be surface level stuff, because most people who can identify where they come from or they have a culture, they just kind of naturally kind of give, right? It's a give and take. So myself, being that I'm a cultural music educator and I'm a cultural person, just like when I meet somebody, I always tell them, hey, my name is Michelle, or they ask, what's your nationality? I say, I'm a member of the Pyramid Lake Paiute Tribe. I'm a Native person. There's a give and take relationship there. But one of the things I find with music educators is there's this idea that unless it's written down, whether it's written down in notation form or word form, then it's just going to go out of existence. And I say it that way, and I'm using terminology and changing my voice that way, because that is not reality. That is something that's made up from a colonized mindset. And I'm always trying to distinguish between my decolonization mind, I guess the mind that I grew up in, what I know about cultures, versus the colonized mentality. So for any music educator, if you shared that Meisner post, and it mentions the word indigenous in there, there is nothing reflective about any indigenous nation culture that I have ever been to, including my own. There is nothing in there that matches the actual lived realities of what your students will be going through. Now I want to go back to this excellence point, because I feel there's also in music education with music educators, there's this idea that there is no high-level performing individuals in different cultures, and that is completely not true either. So number one, we don't need to write it down in any formation. In direct classical music notation, we don't need to write it down in notation form for things to survive generations through generations. That is not needed. If you want to hold on to that belief that you think classical music education is like bringing this to, the people who can't read music, they're bringing it to, and we're helping you, we're saving you. No, you're not. No, you are not. This is really far out there for a music educated person. So I would say let go of that belief. If you let go of that belief, then you're going to have to replace it with something. So number one, cultures do not need your notations. They do not need you to write it down. They don't need any kind of written down things for it to survive. Not in these days right now. So what do they need? When you go, and I learn, I was a backup singer from some drum groups. I learned how to Southern backup sing for a drum group called Southern Express, which I got to hear them this weekend, but I didn't go sing with them this weekend. It's been a long time. But when I was learning those songs, no one gave me music. And I am a classically trained music, right? I got a full ride scholarship as a clarinet player. I was your first chair player all throughout high school, in the All-State, in the honor band. I was your drum major, not only in high school, and I won an award for it in high school, and also when I was in college. I've been able to read music scores since I was 13. So there's this level of training, right, that I have as a classical music educator, but also as an Indigenous person. I've also composed some new songs this year in the style that of my tribe. So in the style of my tribe, I'm a member of the Pyramid Lake Paiute Tribe here in Nevada. We are the Great Basin Natives. We have what we call circle dance songs. So here in the state of Nevada, where originally before any colonization anybody came into this area, we had our circle dance songs, and that's kind of what survived. And so do we need you to write those down for us? Music education. No, we don't. As a music educator myself, sometimes I write down the words so the kids can kind of see it, because we have a writing system for Paiute. I don't know that they've necessarily established a writing system for Washoe or Shoshone just yet. They haven't fully picked one, but for Paiute in this area, we established a writing system in 2004. All right, so going back to these two ideas, music educators, if you are watching this, very important, if you think that you are being an ally or you're being a culturally competent music educator, thinking everything always has to be written down, otherwise how else is it get to be preserved? Culturally competent and those and still believing that are not the same thing. I'm speaking to you right now based off of all the knowledge that I know of the lived experience and the academic experience. I don't need a PowerPoint, right, to tell you this. It's ingrained in here. So when you are rethinking and you want to decolonize your music room, so to speak, you also have to understand that other cultures, when we perform our music, there are those of us who take our culture so seriously, you know, that we set the bar. And I say we because in certain aspects that I do, we're somewhat setting the bar for, sorry, my little kitten's getting in the way. We're setting the bar for what other people are going to follow. You know, there's first place winners, second place winners. There's a hierarchy. Oh, my little kitten's playing with stuff. There's a hierarchy to things. Otherwise, we wouldn't be giving out first place, second place, or third place. There's a way to sing songs. Make sure that, you know, the pitches are right. Are they written down? No. How do you know they're right? Because you know, you're trained orally. And that has nothing to do with classical music and indigenous music being the polar opposite. And in that post, I'm referencing the Meisner post for you music educators out there. Also, within that post, I saw one of the creators of that post. She was saying that she created that post because she thought that classical music in her education, somewhere along the line, her professors, it sounds like, she didn't have a good experience being taught the classical music in her higher ed. And I didn't have a really fun time with some of the things in my undergrad college, but I was a good musician, and I knew it, and I was being treated different because of my skin color, not because my skills were lacking. They were actually a little over the top in being there. So again, going back to this concept of bringing indigenous music or cultural music into your classroom. Number one, you see my kid back there. Number one, in order to be able to say that you're a culturally competent educator, have you been in actual cultural situations with the culture that you say that you're speaking about? Have you been with the adults, and have you seen the excellence? Have you seen what the standard is in that culture for the type of music that you're performing? That is a question you should ask yourself. That's a question I ask myself. So these are questions that I ask myself all the time. And again, I don't have a notepad, I don't have a PowerPoint, because these are things that I automatically do. And I'm also a Zumba instructor, so I just got done teaching Zumba. And the same thing applies to being a Zumba instructor for myself, because I'm a cultural person. When I decide that I'm going to do a certain type of song, and I say that this is an Afrobeat song, am I actually doing, moves that are actually Afrobeat moves, or am I just saying that and then I'm making up my own moves because I couldn't do the ones that actually went there, Make sure, and I spend a lot of time with the people who have the most knowledge in their culture for different dance styles and also their music. This is a way of living. There is no one-stop shop. There's no one conference or training that you could go to over a weekend and then boom, you're culturally competent. No, this is a lifestyle. The less amount of experience you have outside your own culture, this goes for me too. Just because I'm native, it does not mean that, oh, you have an advantage. You're from a different culture. You're from Native American culture, so you have an advantage. No, I don't have an advantage. I have just chosen to be open to going to other cultural events all my life. And I also have decided that my culture and the values that I have are just that. They're the values of my culture and the values that I understand. I allow for other people to have different ones. I don't think in my mind everybody needs to be like me. And within music education, that's where we're getting these weird people, or these weird things claiming that indigenous music is this, when the creator, the person writing it, has no experience with any, I would say, indigenous people, number one, or any other culture other than their own. When you are a music educator who spends time with other cultures, not just to take things, when you actually know, and the culture can say, hey, yeah, I know that person. When you have that symbiotic relationship, I can tell. When that relationship isn't there and the music educator claims to be, culturally competent and really wanting everyone to get along, there are certain things when you claim that, but in your speech and the way you're speaking to me, there are certain things that will notify someone like me that no, you're not who you say you are. I've worked with so many different educators who are like this. And anyways, I just really wanted to clarify the Meisner post that's talking about indigenous music. There's nothing in any of those posts that actually portrays actual indigenous music as it happens not only in North American indigenous communities, but even other indigenous communities around the world. So please, if you're a music educator, when you're claiming something, understand that you need the experience. Academia, and I know there's also some other cultural people. We have the BIPOC, Black, Indigenous, people of color, Black, Brown, Indigenous, and Asians. Whatever you're identifying as, if you're a music educator, because BBIA, Black, Brown, Indigenous, people of color, whatever it is, terminology that you're using, academia, getting your PhD, getting your master's, and being able to quote different things does not give you a pass to use indigenous this and indigenous that without having any experience within the culture, because it shows up in your speech, it shows up in the questions you ask, it shows up in just not knowing anything about the culture, you know. So hopefully I will be creating another video on how Black, Brown, and Black, Brown people of color who aren't indigenous, because indigenous people, our plight that I guess we suffer from the most is invisibility. I've actually been silenced by some Black, Brown people of color because they wanted their voice more amplified, or they're trying to tell me how to introduce myself, how I need to present myself. And that is not being a culturally competent person either. And it goes back to what you value. You know, if you're going to say you're this culturally competent music educator and you know something about indigenous culture, so here's how I think of that. So if you say that you're going to use the word indigenous, I'm looking for actual things that match the reality that I know of not only my indigenous tribe, but many other indigenous tribes. And when I read any of those posts of the Meisner, none of it, 0%, lined up with any of the lived reality that I know. There was absolutely no mention of excellence. There was no, you know, actually they didn't even ask an indigenous person to be a part in there. And there was a quote from somebody who wasn't even an indigenous person either, from the United States. So a lot of people, I would recommend too, for Black, Brown, people of color, if you don't know any indigenous people, I wouldn't even say Black, Brown, Indigenous, and Asian people. I wouldn't even put them, you know, in there. Talk about what you know about. Write about what you actually know about. Academia gives a false sense that you can write about something, put it in a PowerPoint form, and then it's actual truth. And that's not how indigenous people, that's not how we look at it and value it. If I can see the experience of what we know to be true in your writing, then that may also be, you know, you may have a valid point of view. But when you start writing about things, music educators, and you start saying things using indigenous, and it's from your outsider understanding of never having had an adult conversation with the adults or somebody who's knowledgeable in that culture, it's very apparent. It's very apparent that you don't know what you're talking about. And this doesn't, I think we need to get away from, in music education, well, she has a master's degree, she has a this degree. Well, I have a master's degree too, but I prefer having a lived experience along with the academia, so I can know if what has been written about whatever culture in the world is actually true. Now, how do I do that? And I'm going to give you a little insight into how I see things and to how I live. And I know some people, music educators, say, yeah, but you have an advantage. You are a brown person. You are a native. No, I actually don't. I could have chosen to stay on my reservation, and I could have chosen to only know about Paiute. I could have chosen only to care about my own culture. That would mean I'm monocultural. You know, I would listen to, I could choose to listen to other people and say, they need to have my values. And if they're not talking about my values, something's wrong with that person. I could choose to see other people and think they're the same as me, but I choose not to. I choose to say, okay, well, this person has got to be one of the most interesting people. Let me find out about this person, where they're from, what their culture is. Let me go ahead and figure out, and it's going to be different from me. So this is how I look at people when I meet people. This is very different than what the majority of music educators, act like. And their beliefs are, if you're a music educator, you went through the system, you're going to behave a certain way. And because that's not how I think, in my own field with music educators, there's been a lot of butting of heads, because with me specifically, and when I bring in the piece of, where did you get that cultural song? And they get real defensive. Why are you asking me that? I'm not following along the lines of the music educators kind of way they value things. So when we meet people, be open to understanding different value systems. Most of the time, I'm the one on the one side being open to other different value systems. People who are not Indigenous oftentimes think that certain people have the same values. And when we get into an idea of we value different things, I value experience and actual lived experience over I wrote an academic paper and I've never seen or visited any of the people ever in my life. I will value the experience, but that's a value I have. Now, we have some music educators who will value what's written in a book and it's written down and it's in a nice PowerPoint. I'm going to value that over what you say is your lived experience. So we have a clash right there, right? So again, going back to this Meisner post, hopefully I'll do another video on YouTube kind of breaking this down even more. But feel free to send me an inbox to talk about it. If you're going to send me an inbox trying to play devil's advocate here on, the authors meant well, they were just talking about Indigenous, and no, they didn't. They have no experience at all with anything, a lived experience. And if you want to hold up that Meisner post about Indigenous music and classical music and share it around, I'd say it's highly controversial because it's very damaging, because none of the information on there reflects actual lived realities of cultural or Indigenous peoples. And I'm an Indigenous person letting you know that. But if you choose to still believe in the PowerPoint and the slides, but they look so official, it was a pretty color, look at the format it's in. That's the draw, that's the draw. But when you're a cultural person, Indigenous person, or just someone who's open to other people, to other value systems, that's not how we get along. We don't write papers about each other. It just flows organically. There's a give and there's a take. I'm from this tribe. Here's what my music is. Cool. You're from that tribe. And then maybe we could vibe together. Maybe we're dancing the same songs or doing things like that. But for me, myself too, I also choose excellence for myself. I'm a fancy shawl dancer. I happen to want to be a champion dancer, so I have to eat different. I have to study certain songs. I have to make sure I have my beadwork is all in order, make sure I have my outfits together, or all those things I want to make. If I don't want to be an excellent, fancy shawl dancer, then whatever. I don't have to decide to eat right. I don't have to work out all the time. I could just show up however and just dance, and whatever happens. But also we set bars for ourselves. We decide how excellent we want to be. We decide how much, are we always seeking after the truth, or are we deciding I just want to think what everybody else thinks in this room right now because I don't want to stand out. I don't want to offend anybody. That's not necessarily, how I think. I always think about, okay, who am I serving? Who am I teaching this Zumba class to? Who are they and what do they want? What kids am I teaching? What nations do they come from? Do they speak my language? What is their language? So I always want to know what their language is. But these are choices I'm making. And I don't have an advantage. I'm just saying I choose different things. And when I choose to acknowledge who I'm teaching Zumba to, who I'm dancing for, who I'm teaching, what their backgrounds are, when I choose that, that's going to lead to me choosing content that I consume in those people's cultures. And it's also going to lead me to want to have conversations with the adults who are doing the music or the dancing in an excellent way within the cultures. So those are choices that I make. Those are not inherent things that I'm just lucky that I do that and that's how I have this knowledge. No, I on purpose choose. To care about whatever. If I'm doing a performance, if I'm teaching kids, if it's a different tribe than mine, there's over 576 different federally recognized tribes. There's more than that, actually, by the way. But if I'm only a Pyramid Lake Paiute, that's where I'm enrolled. But if I go to another state and people want me to teach their children, I need to know what that tribe is there. And I will choose to, number one, know what that tribe is there. I'll tell them my tribe, and I'll probably share a song from my tribe. But I have to know who those kids are. I have to know their language. I have to know, and how do I know? Because I seek out adults to have conversations with. I think that's the most important part. And when somebody claims that something is indigenous, but everything they write about does not match any lived experience of actual indigenous people, then it's not true. And if you're also a music educator watching me, well, why should I believe you? Well, you don't have to. That's your choice. But if you choose not to listen to an actual indigenous person who spends time in all these different realms and knows the excellence and knows the ins and outs of it, plus knows the ins and outs of music education, then that definitely is your choice. But you're also going to have to say that you're choosing the colonized side. You're also going to have to say that you're choosing to be a sole classical music educator and not be a multicultural, culturally competent music educator. You cannot decide that you're going to call yourself this when you basically push away actual lived experiences by people, adults, and other cultures. Because I'm probably not the first one whose ideas and thoughts that you're like iffy on. So anyways, I just really wanted to go live. I had a lot to say. I've been stewing on this post ever since I saw the post. And again, to all my music educator friends, I am telling you that post, the Meisner post, has no basis in reality and that of Indigenous person, not even a hint. And if you choose to share it and you choose to say it's saying other things and other than it is, I would just leave it alone completely. Because if you're trying to take something that's not at all correct and trying to vouch for it, there's a problem, but in the thought process of colonization and decolonization right there. You're choosing the colonization process, and you're also choosing to vouch for people and trying to make them say something different than what they've actually shown themselves to be. And that is no experience with Indigenous people at all, yet claiming that they have that there. And that's not a good value. That's not a good place to be. I'd say reject the whole thing, throw it out, go find other educators, go find other Indigenous people, the adults, the people who are doing our music in an excellent fashion, the people who are winning the drum contest, the hand drum contest, or putting out records and getting nominated, for the, Native American Music Awards up in Canada. And then they also, there are Native groups that do get nominated for Grammys also in this country too. So look up to those people and go find out for yourself. But thank you guys for listening. The few of you who stuck with me, and know this is a music educator post, but I just wanted to give some insight into how I think, and to really just put out, I guess, a warning against that post. It is dangerous to music education. It is dangerous for people to throw around the word Indigenous, and it's so easy because we fight invisibility. And it's like, well, I don't know any Indigenous people. Let me just put the Indigenous there, and no Indigenous. They're just not even alive today, But that's not the case. We are alive. We're here. Or I'm alive. I'm here. I'm advocating on behalf of my profession. So thank you guys for listening. I hope to see you guys later. Sa'a Panitawa.